I sit in my car outside the airport departure terminal, clutching a one-way ticket to Seattle with $23 left in my wallet. I just hung up on my mother, who called crying, begging me not to leave because their house is about to be foreclosed. The same parents who chose beer and buffalo wings over watching their only son graduate summa cum laude from engineering school 3 hours earlier. As I stare at the departure board, I realize this moment will define the rest of my life. The morning started with such promise. I woke up at 6:30, my graduation cap and gown hanging carefully on my closet door, where I had placed them the night before. 4 years of engineering school at the University of Texas had led to this moment. Summa cum laude, top 5% of my class. Job interviews lined up. Everything I had worked for was finally coming together. I sent my parents a text while brushing my teeth. Big day today. Ceremony starts at 2. I saved you seats in Section C, row 12. Can't wait to see you both there. My father, Gary, responded within minutes. We'll be there, son. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Your mother is so proud. My mother, Sandra, followed up with a string of heart emojis. And our brilliant boy. We've been telling everyone about your achievements. See you soon. The messages filled me with warmth. Despite our rocky relationship over the years, despite the constant financial stress that seemed to follow my parents everywhere, today would be different. Today, they would finally see that their investment in my education had paid off. I arrived at the university 2 hours early, helping set up chairs and checking the sound system as part of my student volunteer duties. The campus buzzed with excitement. Families streamed in, carrying flowers, balloons, cameras. Proud grandparents shuffled slowly to their seats while younger siblings complained about wearing uncomfortable dress clothes. I kept glancing toward Section C, row 12, watching for familiar faces. My phone stayed silent. At 1:45, 15 minutes before the ceremony began, I called my father. We're running a little late, Gary said, his voice slightly slurred. Traffic is crazy, you know how it is. I could hear laughter and shouting in the background. A television announcer's voice boomed about first quarter statistics. My stomach dropped. Dad, where are you? Home, but we're leaving right now. Sandra, grab your purse. The call ended abruptly. I walked to my place in the graduation lineup, my hands trembling slightly as I adjusted my cap. Around me, other graduates chatted nervously about their families in the audience, about job prospects, about the future stretching ahead of us. My roommate Jake appeared beside me in line. Where are your folks? I thought they were coming. They'll be here, I said, forcing a smile. They're just running late. But as the processional music began, and we filed into the auditorium, I knew they wouldn't make it. The ceremony would last 2 hours. Even if they left immediately, they would miss my moment on stage. The dean welcomed families and friends. 800 graduates sat in perfect rows, while thousands of loved ones filled the bleachers behind us. I turned once to scan Section C, row 12. Empty seats stared back at me. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Having friends over for game. You understand, congrats, honey. My vision blurred. I blinked rapidly, trying to focus on the speeches about our bright futures and limitless potential. But all I could think about was those empty seats, about the friends gathered at my childhood home, watching grown men throw a football around a field, instead of watching their son accept the highest academic honors his university offered. When they called my name for summa cum laude recognition, I walked across that stage alone. The announcer's voice echoed through the auditorium. Emery Thompson, Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering, summa cum laude. Scattered applause from strangers. No familiar voices calling my name. No cameras flashing from Section C, row 12. Jake's family cheered when I returned to my seat. His mother leaned over and whispered, We're so proud of you, honey. You should be incredibly proud of yourself. Her kindness almost broke me completely. After the ceremony ended, I lingered in the parking lot, while families celebrated around me. Graduates posed for pictures with their parents, their grandparents, their siblings. Restaurants would be packed tonight with celebration dinners. Hotel rooms had been booked months in advance for out-of-town relatives. I opened Facebook while sitting in my car, hoping to see some acknowledgement from my parents. Instead, I found photos posted 30 minutes earlier. My mother had uploaded pictures from their Super Bowl party. The living room was packed with neighbors and friends, everyone wearing jerseys and holding beer bottles. But the caption on the final photo made me physically ill. Our daughter we never had. The picture showed my parents with their arms around Tracy Morrison, my high school girlfriend who had married her college boyfriend 2 years ago. Tracy beamed at the camera while my father kissed her cheek, and my mother hugged her tight. Tracy had commented, "Thanks for the amazing party. Love my Dallas family." 15 people had liked the post. Nobody mentioned graduation. Nobody asked where I was. I sat in that parking lot for an hour, watching the last families pack up their cars and drive away. The campus grew quiet. Maintenance crews began cleaning up decorations and folding chairs. My phone rang, Gary calling. "How did it go, champ? Sorry, we missed it. You know how these things are with company over." I walked across that stage alone, Dad. "Well, we raised you to be independent. That's a good thing, right? Listen, we need to talk when you get home. Something important came up." The line went dead. I started my car and drove toward the house where I had grown up, where my childhood bedroom still contained every academic award I had ever earned. Driving past suburban neighborhoods where other families were probably sitting down to celebration dinners, talking about their graduates' bright future. Instead, I was heading home to parents who had chosen a football game, and my ex-girlfriend over the most important day of my academic life. Walking through my childhood front door while still wearing my graduation cap felt surreal. The house reeked of beer and buffalo wing sauce. Empty bottles covered every surface. Chip crumbs crunched under my feet as I navigated through the living room, where a dozen people still lounged on couches and recliners, eyes glued to post-game analysis. Nobody looked up when I entered. Nobody congratulated me. Nobody even seemed to notice the graduation cap perched on my head. My father, Gary, stood in the kitchen, washing dishes with unusual intensity. His movements were sharp, agitated. Beer bottles clinked together as he tossed them into recycling bins already overflowing with evidence of their party. "There he is," Gary announced, too loudly, his voice carrying the forced enthusiasm that always accompanied his third or fourth drink. "Our college graduate." My mother, Sandra, emerged from the hallway, her face flushed from alcohol and excitement. She wore a Dallas Cowboys jersey I had never seen before, the fabric still creased from recent purchase. "How was the ceremony, honey?" "We saw some of it on the school's website livestream when the game went to commercial."
The casual lie hit me like a physical blow. The university had not live-streamed our ceremony.
"It was fine," I said, unable to summon the energy for confrontation. "Not yet." "Good, good. Listen, come help me move some chairs back to the garage. We need to talk about something important." Gary led me outside, where the February air cut through my thin graduation gown. Other neighbors were grilling dinner in their backyards. The smell of barbecue and the sound of children playing reminded me how different this day should have been. "Your mother and I have been discussing your future." Gary began stacking plastic chairs with unnecessary force. "Now that you're done with school, it's time to start thinking about family responsibilities." I waited, sensing something terrible approaching. "We need $50,000, Emery, soon, like within the next 2 weeks." The number hung in the cold air between us. $50,000. More money than I had ever seen in my life. "Dad, I don't have $50,000. I have student loans. I need to find a job. I need to figure out where I'm going to live." "That's where family loyalty comes in." Gary stopped stacking chairs and turned to face me directly. His eyes were bloodshot, and I could smell whiskey beneath the beer on his breath. "You remember Tracy Morrison, right? Your old girlfriend?" Of course I remembered Tracy. The girl my parents had always liked better than me. The girl whose picture they had posted today with the caption, "Our daughter we never had," while their actual son walked across a graduation stage alone. Tracy's husband Derek got sick. Real sick. Cancer. They don't have insurance that covers everything, and The medical bills are piling up faster than they can handle. My stomach began to twist. We co-signed a loan for them 6 months ago. $50,000 to help with treatment costs. We thought Derek would beat this thing quickly, get back to work, and they'd handle the payments. But it's gotten worse. Gary resumed stacking chairs, avoiding my eyes. The bank is demanding full payment. If we don't come up with the money in 2 weeks, they'll come after our house. Your childhood home, Emery. The place where we raised you. My mother appeared in the doorway, having apparently been listening to our conversation. We've already spent your college fund money, Sandra said, her voice taking on the whining tone I remembered from childhood arguments. We had to use it for house payments when your father got laid off last year. We planned to pay it back, but then this situation with Tracy came up. The betrayal compounded. Not only had they broken their promise to return my college fund after graduation, but they had spent money that was supposed to help me start my adult life. You're smart, honey. You just graduated summa cum laude. Banks will give you loans that they wouldn't give us. Student loans, personal loans, whatever it takes. We need you to take out enough money to cover this debt. I stared at both of them, these people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, who were supposed to support my dreams, who were supposed to celebrate my achievements. You want me to go into massive debt to pay for Tracy's husband's medical bills? For family, Sandra corrected. Tracy is like family to us, and family helps family. What about me and my family? Gary's face hardened. Don't be selfish, Emery. This is what good sons do. We raised you, fed you, put a roof over your head for 24 years. Now it's time to give back. Through the kitchen window, I could see Tracy herself sitting at our dining room table laughing with the remaining party guests. She wore designer jeans and jewelry. I knew Derek's job at the auto parts store could never afford. Her hair was professionally styled, her nails freshly manicured. We've already told everyone you agreed to help, Sandra added quickly. Tracy's been so grateful. She keeps talking about what a wonderful brother you are. Brother, the word made me feel sick. Tracy noticed me watching through the window and waved cheerfully. She mouthed, "Thank you," with exaggerated lip movements, then blew me a kiss. I need some air, I said, walking back toward the house. But instead of going inside, I circled around to the mailbox, pulling out bills and statements that my parents had been too distracted by party planning to collect. Credit card bills in amounts that made me dizzy, past due notices on utilities, and at the bottom of the stack, something that made my blood run cold. A credit card statement in my name. A card I had never applied for, never signed, for never used. But somehow it showed a balance of $8,000 and a payment 3 months overdue. My hands shook as I flipped through more mail. 2 additional credit card statements in my name. A loan application approval letter addressed to me for a personal loan I had never requested. My parents had been using my name, my social security number, my identity, to secure money for months. My credit score was probably destroyed before I had even graduated college. I walked back inside holding the statements. "What is this?" I demanded, waving the credit card bills. Gary and Sandra exchanged glances. "We can explain that," Sandra said nervously. "We only used your credit for emergencies. We planned to pay everything back before you found out." "This is identity theft. This is a felony." "Don't be dramatic," Gary snapped. "You're our son. Parents use their children's credit all the time. It's not illegal when it's family." Tracy appeared beside me, apparently having overheard the raised voices. "Thank you so much for being such a good brother about everything," she gushed, reaching out to hug me. "Derek and I were so worried about the medical bills, but knowing you're willing to help out has taken such a weight off our shoulders." She smelled like expensive perfume and wine. Her arms felt suffocating around my neck. "Your parents have been telling everyone what a generous, successful man you've become. They're so proud that you're going to take care of this debt situation for us." I stepped back from her embrace, studying her face. Her smile seemed practiced, calculated. There was no genuine warmth in her eyes. "They've been planning this for months, haven't they?" I said quietly. Tracy's smile faltered slightly. Planning what? Using my graduation as emotional leverage to get me to agree to pay your bills. I don't know what you mean, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Sandra stepped between us. Emery, you're being paranoid. Nobody planned anything. This situation just happened to coincide with your graduation. But I was beginning to see the truth. The Super Bowl party had not been a thoughtless mistake. Skipping my graduation had been deliberate. They had wanted me vulnerable, hurt, guilty. They had wanted me desperate for their approval, so I would agree to anything to win back their love. And Tracy had been part of it from the beginning. That night, I confronted my parents about the identity theft, while Tracy and the last party guests finally left our house. The living room looked like a tornado had hit it. Pizza boxes and beer bottles covered every surface, and someone had spilled salsa on my mother's white carpet. We had no choice, Sandra said, collapsing onto the couch with dramatic exhaustion. The bills were piling up. Your father's unemployment ran out. We were going to lose everything. So you stole my identity instead of getting jobs? Gary slammed his beer bottle down on the coffee table hard enough to make the remaining empties rattle. We didn't steal anything. You're our son. Everything we have belongs to the family. Everything you have belongs to the family. That's how this works. That's not how anything works, Dad. What you did was commit fraud. Multiple felonies. You could go to prison. Both of my parents laughed. Actually laughed. Nobody's going to prison, Gary said, settling back into his recliner. You're not going to call the police on your own parents. No jury in the world would convict us for borrowing money in our son's name during a financial emergency. Besides, Sandra added, who would believe you? We're upstanding members of this community. We've lived here for 30 years. You're just a college kid with no credit history and no job. The casual certainty in their voices terrified me more than their anger would have. They had calculated this entire scheme, weighed the risks, and decided I was powerless to stop them. I walked to my childhood bedroom, needing space to think. The room remained exactly as I had left it 4 years earlier when I moved into the dorms. Academic achievement awards lined the walls. Honor roll certificates, debate team trophies, science fair ribbons. Evidence of a lifetime spent trying to earn my parents' pride. But now I understood that pride was something they were incapable of feeling for me. I was not their son in any meaningful sense. I was an asset to be leveraged, a resource to be exploited. My laptop sat on my old desk, and I opened it to search for legal information about identity theft. What I found made me feel even worse. The damage to my credit would take years to repair. The debt they had accumulated in my name would follow me for decades, unless I took legal action against them. While researching, I discovered something else that made my stomach turn. Hidden in my browser history, from when I had used this computer during winter break, I found evidence that my parents had been planning this graduation scheme for months. Email threads between my mother and Tracy dating back to October. Messages discussing how to approach me for money after graduation. Conversations about using my emotional vulnerability to secure my cooperation. One email from Sandra to Tracy was particularly damning. We'll skip the graduation ceremony and throw a party instead. When he gets home disappointed and hurt, we'll present the debt situation as a family emergency. He'll be so desperate to prove himself worthy of our love that he'll agree to anything. Tracy's response: perfect. Derek and I will come to the party so he can see how much we appreciate his sacrifice. I'll make sure to act extra grateful. They had orchestrated my pain, deliberately, methodically. I printed every email, every credit card statement, every piece of evidence I could find. Whatever happened next, I would not let them destroy my documentation. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Chen, my college friend who had graduated 2 years earlier and moved to Seattle for a software engineering job. Saw your graduation posts on Instagram. Congrats, man. Hey, my company is hiring engineers if you're interested. Seattle tech scene is exploding. Let me know if you want me to put in a word. Seattle. 2,000 miles away from parents who saw me as a bank account rather than a human being. I called Marcus immediately. "The job is real," he confirmed after I explained my situation in vague terms. 55,000 starting salary, full benefits, relocation assistance. It's entry level, but the company is growing fast. Lots of room for advancement. How soon could I start? Tomorrow, if you wanted. They're desperate for qualified engineers. I could set up a phone interview for Monday morning if you're serious. I looked around my childhood bedroom one last time. At the awards and certificates that had never been enough. At the bed where I had dreamed about making my parents proud someday. "Set up the interview," I said. I spent the next 2 hours researching how to withdraw my entire savings account, how to buy plane tickets online, how to pack a life into a single suitcase. My savings contained exactly $3,000. Enough for a plane ticket, a security deposit on an apartment, and maybe 2 weeks of food if I was careful. At midnight, I bought a one-way ticket to Seattle, departing the next evening. By morning, I had quietly packed everything essential into one large suitcase and one carry-on bag. 4 years of college textbooks would stay behind. My childhood belongings would stay behind. Everything that connected me to this house and these people would stay behind. I tried to leave quietly, but my parents were waiting in the kitchen when I carried my bags downstairs. "Where do you think you're going?" Gary demanded. "Seattle. I have a job interview Monday morning." Sandra jumped up from the breakfast table, her face flushing red with anger. "You cannot leave right now. We have a family crisis. We need that $50,000 in 2 weeks, or we lose the house." "Then get jobs, both of you. Take responsibility for your own debts." Gary stood up slowly, his bulk blocking my path to the front door. At 6 feet tall and 250 pounds, he had used physical intimidation to control family arguments my entire childhood. "You're not leaving this house until we figure out a solution to this money problem together," he said quietly, his voice carrying the threat of violence I remembered from my teenage years. But I was no longer a scared teenager. "Move, Dad. Make me." For a moment, we stared at each other across the kitchen. 24 years of resentment and disappointment crystallized into this single confrontation. Then my phone rang, an unknown local number.
Hello?
"Is this Emery Thompson?" "Yes." "This is Janet Wilson from Austin Bank and Trust. I'm calling about some irregularities we've discovered with loan applications submitted in your name. We need to schedule a meeting to discuss potential fraud." My parents' faces went white. "We'd also like to discuss the employment verification documents submitted with your applications. It appears someone has been claiming you work for companies that have never heard of you." I looked directly at my parents while responding to Janet. "I'd be happy to meet with you, but I should mention that I never submitted any loan applications. It sounds like someone has been committing identity theft." Gary stepped away from the door. "We understand completely, Mr. Thompson. This type of family financial abuse is more common than people realize. We've already flagged the accounts and frozen any additional activity. Can you come in Monday morning to file a formal complaint?" "I'll be in Seattle by Monday, but I can file reports with law enforcement there and send you documentation by fax." After I hung up, Sandra began crying. Not the manipulative tears I had seen throughout my childhood, but genuine panic. "You can't destroy your own family," she whispered. "You already did that," I said, picking up my suitcase. "You destroyed this family when you decided to steal from me, when you skipped my graduation for a football game, when you chose Tracy over your own son." I walked past my father toward the front door. "If you leave now, don't ever come back," Gary called after me. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob and turned around one final time. That was always the plan. But as I loaded my bags into my car, I discovered one final betrayal that nearly broke me completely. My phone buzzed with an email notification, a message from the Dallas engineering firm where I had been scheduled to interview the following week. "Mr. Thompson, we've received some concerning information about your character and reliability from individuals claiming to be family references. We've decided to withdraw our job offer. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. My parents had not only stolen my identity and skipped my graduation, they had sabotaged my local job prospects to ensure I had no choice but to comply with their demands. They had tried to trap me in Dallas, desperate and unemployed, completely dependent on their goodwill. Instead, they had just convinced me that leaving was not just the right choice. It was the only choice. I drove to the airport with my phone turned off, my bank account empty, except for $23 and a one-way ticket to a city where nobody knew my name or my history. For the first time in 24 years, I was completely free. Landing in Seattle with nearly empty pockets and nowhere to sleep was terrifying, but it was also liberating in a way I had never experienced. Every choice from this moment forward would be completely my own. I spent my first night in a 24-hour airport diner, nursing cups of coffee, and working on Marcus's laptop to prepare for my Monday phone interview. The engineering questions were challenging but fair, and my interviewer seemed impressed with my academic record. "Can you start Wednesday?" she asked at the end of our conversation. "Absolutely." "Great. We'll email you the paperwork today. Welcome to Cascade Solutions." $55,000 a year. In Dallas, that would have been a decent starting salary. In Seattle, it meant I could afford a small apartment and basic living expenses if I was careful with money. Marcus offered to let me crash on his couch until I found housing, but I wanted to establish independence immediately. Instead, I found a coffee shop called Emerald City Roasters, where the owner, Carmen Rodriguez, was looking for part-time help. "I can't pay much," Carmen admitted during my impromptu interview Tuesday morning. $15 an hour, maybe 25 hours a week. "But you seem smart, and I need someone who can handle both customers and technology." Carmen was in her late 30s, a former Microsoft program manager who had started the coffee shop after getting laid off in a corporate restructuring. She worked 16-hour days trying to keep the business afloat while managing everything from inventory to marketing to equipment repairs. "I have an engineering degree, so," I told her, "I could help with more than just serving coffee." She studied my resume while steam hissed from the espresso machine behind her. "You'd be overqualified for everything I need." "Maybe. But I need income immediately, and you need someone who can solve problems. Let's see if we can help each other." Working at Emerald City Roasters before and after my regular engineering job became the foundation of everything that followed. Carmen's coffee shop struggled with the same operational inefficiencies that plagued many small businesses. Inventory management was handled through handwritten notes. Customer ordering was completely manual. Financial tracking was done with paper receipts stuffed into shoeboxes. "Have you ever considered automating some of these processes?" I asked during my second week. "With what money business software costs thousands of dollars and I'm barely breaking even." "What if I built something custom for you?" I spent evenings in Carmen's shop after my engineering job ended writing code to streamline her supply chain management. Simple programs that tracked inventory, automatically predicted customer demand based on historical data, optimized staff scheduling based on traffic patterns. Within a month, Carmen's operational efficiency improved dramatically. Food waste dropped by 30%. Customer wait times decreased. Profit margins increased enough for Carmen to hire additional staff and extend operating hours. Word spread quickly through Seattle's small business community. Other coffee shop owners, restaurant managers, and retail store operators began asking if I could solve similar problems for their businesses. "You should start a consulting company," Carmen suggested one evening while we cleaned espresso machines and counted the day's receipts. "I know at least 6 business owners who would pay good money for custom software solutions." The idea had been growing in my mind for weeks. My engineering salary covered basic living expenses, but I wanted something more meaningful than corporate project management. I wanted to build solutions that helped people improve their lives. My first official consulting client was Douglas Patterson, a retired Microsoft executive who owned 3 small apartment buildings in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood. Douglas had heard about my work with Carmen through mutual connections in the local business community. Property management is still stuck in the 1980s, Douglas explained during our initial meeting. Rent collection maintenance requests, tenant communication, financial reporting. Everything is manual, inefficient, and time-consuming. Douglas offered me $5,000 to develop a comprehensive property management system, more money than I had ever earned for a single project. Working nights and weekends, I built software that automated rent collection, tracked maintenance requests, managed tenant communication through a simple web portal, and generated detailed financial reports. The system paid for itself within 3 months by reducing Douglas's administrative workload and eliminating late rent collection issues. This is exactly what every property manager in Seattle needs, Douglas said when I demonstrated the final product. Have you considered scaling this into a real business? I had been considering exactly that. But I was also thinking about my parents, whose silence since my departure felt ominous. No phone calls, no text messages, no emails. Either they were handling their financial crisis independently, or they were planning something worse. The answer came on a Friday evening in late April, while I was working late at Carmen's coffee shop, debugging code for a new client project. My phone rang with a call from an unfamiliar Seattle number. Is this Emery Thompson? Yes, who's calling? This is Detective Sarah Mitchell with Seattle Police Department. We've received a report that you may have stolen money from family members in Texas. We need to schedule a meeting to discuss these allegations. My hands began trembling. I sat down heavily in one of Carmen's mismatched chairs, trying to process what was happening. What kind of allegations? According to the report filed by Gary and Sandra Thompson, you withdrew family emergency funds without permission and fled the state to avoid responsibility for family debts. They're requesting that we freeze your bank accounts and investigate you for theft. Carmen noticed my distress and walked over, her face creased with concern. Detective Mitchell, my parents committed identity theft. They used my personal information to secure loans and credit cards without my knowledge. I have documentation of everything they did. That may be, Mr. Thompson, but we have to investigate all reports of financial crimes. Can you come to the station Monday morning? After the call ended, I explained the situation to Carmen, whose anger on my behalf was immediate and fierce. They're trying to destroy your business before it really gets started, she said. This is harassment, pure and simple. But what if the police believe them? What if they freeze my accounts? I have client obligations, rent payments, basic living expenses. Carmen studied my face for a long moment, then walked to her office and returned with a checkbook. How much do you need to cover expenses for the next month? I can't take money from you. Your business is just getting stable. You've increased my profits by 40% in 2 months. You've helped me build something sustainable. Let me help you build something sustainable. She wrote a check for $3,000 and pressed it into my hands. Call a lawyer first thing Monday morning. Fight this properly and keep building your business. Don't let them win by making you afraid to succeed. That weekend, I worked 20 hours straight, documenting every detail of my parents' identity theft, every email that proved their premeditation, every financial record that showed their fraud. I researched identity theft laws, gathered client testimonials, and prepared evidence that would demonstrate my legitimate income sources. But I also made a decision that surprised even me. If my parents wanted to escalate this conflict, I would meet them with overwhelming force. Not revenge, but justice. Not just defending myself, but ensuring they faced consequences for their crimes. Monday morning, I hired Sandra Kim, a Seattle attorney who specialized in family financial abuse cases. Your parents have made a serious mistake, Sandra said after reviewing my documentation. Filing false police reports is a felony. Committing identity theft across state lines is a federal crime. If they wanted to avoid prosecution, they should have stayed quiet and hoped you wouldn't press charges. What happens next? We file countercharges with both local and federal authorities. We document every aspect of their financial abuse, and we make sure they understand that continuing to harass you will only make their legal situation worse. That same week, I landed my largest consulting contract yet. A Seattle-based aerospace company had heard about my property management software and wanted me to develop a custom inventory management system for their parts suppliers.
$25,000 for 3 months of work.
Suddenly, my part-time consulting income exceeded my full-time engineering salary. Carmen encouraged me to leave Cascade Solutions and focus completely on building my own company. "You're helping people solve real problems," she said. "That's more valuable than any corporate job." In June, I officially incorporated Thompson Solutions. My first major contract was with a restaurant chain that needed point-of-sale integration across 12 locations. $40,000 for a system that would save them hundreds of thousands in operational costs over 5 years. By summer, I had 6 active clients and a waiting list of businesses interested in custom software development. My monthly income exceeded what many people earned in a year. But my parents were not finished with their harassment campaign. In July, I received another call from Seattle police. "Mr. Thompson, we've received additional reports about stolen family funds. Your parents are claiming you stole inheritance money that belonged to multiple family members." This time I was ready. "Detective, I'd like you to speak with my attorney. We have extensive documentation proving these allegations are false and retaliatory. We're also prepared to file charges for filing false police reports." The harassment stopped immediately after Sandra sent copies of our evidence to Dallas authorities. My parents apparently realized that continued lies would only accelerate their own prosecution. In August, something happened that changed everything. TechCrunch published an article about innovative small business software solutions in Seattle. Thompson Solutions was featured as one of 5 companies revolutionizing how small businesses leverage technology.
The article generated dozens of inquiries from potential clients, 3 interview requests from local media outlets, and something I had never expected: a phone call from Apex Dynamics, one of Seattle's fastest-growing software companies.
"We've been watching your work," the CEO explained. "We're interested in discussing acquisition possibilities. Would you be available to meet next week?" Acquisition. They wanted to buy my 6-month-old company. The preliminary offer was $2 million. I hung up the phone and sat quietly in my small apartment for an hour, thinking about graduation day 8 months earlier, about walking across that stage alone, about driving to the airport with $23 and no plan beyond escape. Now I was 24 years old, running a successful consulting company, and facing an acquisition offer that would make me financially independent for life. But the best part was not the money. The best part was knowing I had built something meaningful, something that helped other people succeed, something that existed, because I had chosen to leave behind people who wanted to exploit me rather than celebrate me. Carmen knocked on my door that evening with a bottle of wine and a huge grin. "I heard about the Apex Dynamics offer, the small business community talks, you know." We sat on my tiny balcony overlooking the Seattle skyline, watching the sun set behind the Olympic Mountains. "Are you going to sell?" she asked. "I don't know yet. It's a lot of money." "Money isn't everything, though. What would you do afterward?" I had been thinking about that question all day. What did I want to do with financial independence? What would make my life meaningful beyond personal security? I think I'd want to help other people escape situations like mine. Young adults who are being financially abused by family members. People who need resources and support to build independent lives. Carmen smiled. "That sounds like something Emery Thompson would do."
You think so?
"I know so. You've been helping people solve problems since the day I met you. It's who you are." That night I called Douglas Patterson and asked if he would be interested in serving on the board of a non-profit organization focused on financial independence education. "What kind of organization?" he asked.
Something that helps young adults escape family financial abuse. Teaches financial literacy, provides emergency funding, offers legal resources, maybe even provides temporary housing for people who need to leave dangerous situations. Douglas was quiet for a moment. When do we start? The nonprofit foundation took shape quickly once word spread through Seattle's business community. Douglas connected me with attorneys who specialized in family law accountants, who understood nonprofit financial structure, and social workers who had experience helping abuse victims rebuild their lives. We called it Bridge Forward Foundation. The name reflected our mission, helping people build bridges between destructive situations and independent futures. But even as I was planning how to help other people escape family financial abuse, my own legal situation with my parents was reaching a critical point. In September, Sandra Kim called with an update that made my stomach drop. The FBI has opened a formal investigation into your parents' activities, she said. They've identified at least 15 other people whose identities were compromised. Your parents weren't just stealing from you, Emery. They were running a systematic identity theft operation. 15 people, neighbors, family, friends, distant relatives, anyone whose personal information they could access. The scope of their crimes is much larger than we initially realized. I felt sick, not just because of the scale of my parents' criminal activities, but because I realized how many other families were experiencing the same betrayal I had endured. There's more, Sandra continued. The investigation revealed that your parents have been borrowing money from some very dangerous people, not banks. Private lenders who don't follow traditional collection procedures. What kind of dangerous? The kind that makes threats when borrowers can't pay. The kind that doesn't care about legal boundaries. That evening, I received a phone call that confirmed my worst fears. Is this Emery Thompson? Yes, who's calling? This is Vincent Russo. I understand your parents owe me a significant amount of money. The man's voice was calm, professional, and absolutely terrifying. I'm sorry, but I'm not responsible for my parents' debts. Of course not. But your parents told me you were handling their financial obligations. They gave me your contact information and assured me that you would resolve this situation promptly. My parents had given dangerous criminals my personal information. Mr. Russo, my parents committed identity theft against me. I haven't spoken to them in 6 months. I'm not involved in their financial affairs. That's unfortunate, Mr. Thompson, because they borrowed $80,000 from me 6 months ago, and they've missed the last 3 payment deadlines. $80,000. The amount was staggering. Your parents used your name as a reference. They claimed you were a successful businessman who would guarantee their loan if they encountered difficulties. I realized my parents had not just stolen my identity for credit cards and bank loans. They had used my name to secure money from loan sharks. I never guaranteed anything. I never even knew about this loan. Perhaps, but your parents seem to have disappeared, Mr. Thompson. Their house is empty. Their phone numbers are disconnected. You're the only contact information I have left. After Vincent Russo hung up, I called Sandra Kim immediately. This changes everything, she said. If your parents used your name to secure private loans, you could be in physical danger. These aren't people who follow legal collection procedures. What am I supposed to do? We need to contact law enforcement immediately, and you need to consider relocating temporarily until this situation is resolved. But I had worked too hard building my life in Seattle to run away from my parents' crimes. Instead, I decided to fight back more aggressively than they had ever anticipated. The next morning, I called a press conference. Local media outlets had been following my success story as a young entrepreneur, and they were interested in the larger issue of family financial abuse. My parents stole my identity, sabotaged my career prospects, and have now endangered my safety by using my name to secure loans from dangerous people. I announced to reporters from 3 television stations, 2 newspapers, and a regional business magazine. But this isn't just about me. The FBI has discovered that my parents victimized dozens of people in their community. Family financial abuse affects thousands of young adults across the country, and most victims have no resources to fight back. I announced that Bridge Forward Foundation would be launching its programs in January, providing legal aid, financial education, emergency housing, and emotional support to young adults experiencing family financial abuse. Every donation to Bridge Forward Foundation will help other young people escape situations like mine. No victim of family financial abuse should have to choose between personal safety and family loyalty. The press conference generated significant media attention. Local television stations ran feature stories about family financial abuse. National news outlets picked up the story. Bridge Forward Foundation's website received hundreds of inquiries from potential clients and donors. But more importantly, the media attention forced my parents out of hiding. 3 days after the press conference, Gary called me for the first time since I had left Dallas. "You need to stop this media campaign," he said, without any greeting or acknowledgement of our estrangement. "You're destroying our reputation in the community. Your reputation was destroyed when you started committing federal crimes. We never meant for things to go this far. The identity stuff was just temporary until we got back on our feet financially. And the loan shark's dad was Vincent Russo, just temporary too." Gary was quiet for a moment. "We didn't know they would contact you directly. We thought we could handle the payments ourselves. By stealing more money from more people, we were desperate, Emery. You have no idea what it's like to face losing everything." "Actually, I do know what it's like, because you put me in that situation when you destroyed my credit and stole my identity. The difference is that I chose to build something legitimate instead of victimizing other people. You could have helped us. You could have prevented all of this." The victim blaming was so familiar, so predictable, that it no longer had the power to hurt me. I could have enabled your criminal behavior for a few more months. But eventually, you would have faced consequences anyway. At least this way other people might learn from your mistakes. Sandra Thompson hung up without saying goodbye. 2 weeks later, Sandra Kim called with news that felt like vindication and tragedy simultaneously. "Your parents have been arrested," she said. "Federal charges for mail fraud, identity theft, and wire fraud. They're facing up to 20 years in prison." 20 years? The prosecution is pushing for maximum sentences because of the scale of their operation and the number of victims involved. However, if they cooperate with the investigation and provide information about their private lender connections, they might negotiate reduced sentences. I felt an unexpected wave of sadness. Not sympathy for my parents, but grief for the relationship we had never been able to build, for the family we had never actually been. "There's more good news," Sandra continued. "Vincent Russo and 2 associates were arrested based on information your parents provided. Apparently, they were running illegal lending operations across 3 states. That evening, Carmen and I sat in her coffee shop after closing time reviewing donation totals for Bridge Forward Foundation. In 3 weeks, we had raised nearly $200,000 from individual donors and local businesses. People want to help," Carmen said, scrolling through messages from donors who had shared their own stories of family financial abuse. "Your story gave other people permission to talk about their experiences. It's not just my story anymore," I said, reading a message from a young woman whose parents had stolen her inheritance to fund their gambling addiction. "This is bigger than anything I expected." Douglas joined us at 8 o'clock for our weekly board meeting. Bridge Forward Foundation had attracted attention from attorneys, social workers, financial advisors, and business leaders throughout the Pacific Northwest. Our board of directors included experts in family law, nonprofit management, and crisis intervention. "I have some interesting news to share," Douglas said, settling into his usual chair with a cup of Carmen's coffee. "Apex Dynamics called me today. They're still interested in acquiring Thompson Solutions, but they have a new proposal." I looked up from donor messages, curious about what could possibly be different about their acquisition offer. "They want to purchase your consulting business and donate the acquisition payment directly to Bridge Forward Foundation. $2 million would give the foundation enough funding to operate for at least 5 years. I stared at him, trying to process the magnitude of what he was suggesting. They would buy my business and give all the money to the foundation. They're interested in the technology and client relationships you've developed, but they're more interested in supporting your nonprofit work. Apparently, their CEO has personal experience with family financial abuse. Carmen reached across the table and squeezed my hand. What would you do if you didn't have to worry about funding the foundation? I guess I'd focus on helping people full-time, developing programs, training staff, building partnerships with other organizations. Then this decision seems pretty clear. That night, I walked through Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood, thinking about the path that had brought me from a graduation ceremony where I sat alone to a potential $2 million foundation donation. Every terrible thing my parents had done to me had ultimately contributed to my ability to help other people in similar situations. Their betrayal had taught me to recognize family financial abuse. Their harassment had motivated me to fight back legally. Their crimes had given me credibility when advocating for other victims. Even their worst actions had inadvertently served a greater purpose. I called Douglas from my apartment at 11 o'clock. Set up the meeting with Apex Dynamics. Let's make this deal happen. The acquisition negotiations with Apex Dynamics proceeded smoothly through October and November, while my parents' legal situation deteriorated rapidly. Sandra Kim kept me updated on their prosecution as both a victim advocate and as someone whose testimony would be crucial to securing convictions. Your parents have agreed to cooperate with federal investigators, Sandra explained during one of our weekly calls. They're providing information about other identity theft victims, financial crime networks, and illegal lending operations in exchange for reduced sentences. How reduced? 18 months to 3 years instead of the 20-year maximum. They'll also be required to pay restitution to all identified victims and perform community service related to financial crime prevention. I felt conflicted about their lighter sentences, but ultimately satisfied that they would face meaningful consequences for their actions. There's something else you should know, Sandra continued. Tracy Morrison has been cooperating with the investigation from the beginning. She's providing testimony about how your parents recruited her to help manipulate you. Tracy. I had not thought about my ex-girlfriend in months, but learning that she was helping investigators brought a sense of closure I had not expected. She claims your parents convinced her that you had already agreed to help with her husband's medical bills. She says she didn't understand the full scope of their manipulation until FBI agents interviewed her. Do you believe her? Her cooperation has been valuable, and her testimony corroborates your account of their premeditation. Whether she was a victim or a co-conspirator, she's choosing to do the right thing now. The week before Thanksgiving, I received a letter that I had been both expecting and dreading. A handwritten note from my mother written from the federal detention center where she was being held pending sentencing. Dear Emery, the letter began, I know you have every right to hate us for what we did. I know we destroyed your trust and damaged your future in ways that may never be repaired. But I wanted you to know that being in jail has given me time to think about the choices I made and the person I became. The letter continued for 3 pages, describing her growing understanding of how their financial desperation had led to increasingly destructive decisions. She acknowledged the identity theft, the graduation manipulation, the harassment campaign. She accepted responsibility for endangering my safety by involving loan sharks. I don't expect you to forgive us, the letter concluded. I don't expect you to visit us in prison or maintain contact after our release, but I want you to know that we are proud of the man you've become despite our failures as parents. Your success in building a business, helping other people, and creating something meaningful with your life is a testament to your character, not our influence. The letter was signed simply Sandra, rather than Mom. I read it twice, then filed it away without responding. Forgiveness might be possible someday, but not yet. My energy needed to focus on building Bridge Forward Foundation rather than repairing relationships with people who had tried to destroy my future. The Apex Dynamics acquisition finalized on November 30th. $2 million transferred directly to Bridge Forward Foundation, making us one of the largest privately funded nonprofit organizations focused on family financial abuse in the United States. Carmen quit her coffee shop management job to join Bridge Forward Foundation as our Director of Operations. Douglas became our Chairman of the Board. I transitioned into the role of Executive Director, focusing on program development and victim advocacy. Our first major initiative launched in January, a comprehensive support program that provided emergency housing, legal assistance, financial education, and job placement services for young adults escaping family financial abuse. Within 6 months, we had helped 47 people rebuild their lives after leaving exploitative family situations. The program attracted national attention from other nonprofit organizations, university researchers studying family dynamics, and policy advocates working on financial abuse legislation. In March, I was invited to testify before a congressional subcommittee examining family financial abuse as a form of domestic violence. My testimony helped secure federal funding for similar programs in 12 other states. But the most satisfying moment came in April when Vincent Russo and his associates were convicted on federal racketeering charges. The illegal lending operation that had threatened me was dismantled, completely protecting other potential victims from similar harassment. Gary and Sandra Thompson were sentenced in May. 18 months in federal prison, followed by 2 years of supervised probation. They would be required to pay $87,000 in restitution to their victims, including $23,000 to me for the identity theft damage. During the sentencing hearing, I chose to attend as a victim advocate rather than seeking personal vengeance. Both of my parents looked older, smaller, diminished by their time in detention and the weight of their crimes. When the judge asked if I wanted to make a victim impact statement, I spoke directly to my parents for the first time since leaving Dallas 15 months earlier. I hope you use your time in prison to understand the difference between temporary financial problems and permanent character choices, I said, looking at both of them across the courtroom. Financial problems can be solved through hard work, education, and making difficult but honest decisions. Character problems can only be solved by accepting responsibility for your actions and choosing to become better people. I paused, thinking about the dozens of young adults Bridge Forward Foundation had helped since my parents' crimes had motivated me to create the organization. You tried to steal my future to cover your mistakes. Instead, your actions helped me build a future focused on helping other people avoid the trauma you caused me. In a way, you gave me a purpose I might never have discovered otherwise. Gary and Sandra both cried during my statement, but I felt no satisfaction from their tears. Only sadness for time lost and relationships that could have been built on love and support instead of exploitation and manipulation. After the sentencing, Tracy approached me in the courthouse hallway. "I wanted to apologize," she said quietly. "I know my cooperation with the investigation doesn't undo the part I played in hurting you." She looked genuinely remorseful, and I could see that the legal proceedings had taken an emotional toll on her as well. "How is Derek?" I asked. "His cancer is in remission. We're managing the medical bills through payment plans and insurance. No more borrowing money we can't afford to pay back." "I'm glad he's recovering." "Thank you for not pressing charges against me. I know you could have." I had considered pursuing legal action against Tracy, but ultimately decided that destroying more lives would not improve mine or help other abuse victims. "Focus on building something positive instead of dwelling on past mistakes," I said. "That's what I've tried to do." Tracy nodded and walked away, and I realized that our conversation had provided closure for both of us. That evening, Carmen and I celebrated the conclusion of the legal proceedings at her original coffee shop, which had expanded into 3 locations throughout Seattle, thanks to the operational improvements we had implemented together. "How does it feel to have everything officially resolved?" she asked. "Like the end of one story and the beginning of another," I said, watching customers enjoy evening coffee and pastries in the warm, welcoming environment Carmen had created. What's the next story about? I thought about the young adults we were helping through Bridge Forward Foundation, the legislative advocacy that was expanding support services in other states, the research we were funding to better understand family financial abuse. It's about building something that outlasts our individual experiences, I said. Something that helps other people write better stories than we were given. Carmen smiled and raised her coffee cup in a toast. To better stories? To better stories. 2 years later, I stood in the house where I grew up, but it was no longer recognizable as the place where I had experienced years of disappointment and manipulation. Bridge Forward Foundation had purchased the foreclosed property at auction for $67,000 and converted it into our first residential support center. The living room where my parents had hosted their Super Bowl party now served as a common area where young adults recovering from family financial abuse could gather for group counseling sessions and life skills workshops. My childhood bedroom had been transformed into an office, where financial advisors helped clients rebuild credit and develop independent budgets. "It's incredible what you've accomplished here," said Maria Santos, the social worker Bridge Forward Foundation had hired to manage our residential program. 12 people are currently living in our transition housing. All of them are either working or enrolled in educational programs. Most importantly, all of them are building lives free from family exploitation. Walking through the house, I met residents whose stories reminded me why this work mattered. Angela, 19, whose grandmother had stolen her college fund and Social Security benefits. Marcus, 22, whose parents had forced him to take out massive student loans to fund their failing business. Sarah, 21, whose family had threatened violence when she tried to leave an abusive financial relationship. Each person was rebuilding their life with support resources, and most importantly, the knowledge that family financial abuse was not their fault, and they deserved better treatment. Bridge Forward Foundation now operated in 7 states with plans to expand to 15 states by the following year. We had helped over 300 young adults escape family financial abuse situations. Our research partnerships with universities had produced studies that influence policy discussions about domestic violence and financial crimes. Federal legislation inspired partly by my congressional testimony had increased funding for family abuse prevention programs nationwide. Carmen and I had married the previous summer in a small ceremony in the gardens behind her original coffee shop. Douglas walked me down the aisle, having become the father figure I had never experienced growing up. Carmen's parents, who immigrated from Mexico and built a successful restaurant business through decades of hard work, had welcomed me into their family with warmth and acceptance I was still learning to accept. Our wedding represented the integration of chosen family relationships that supported growth rather than exploitation. "Have you heard from your parents since their release?" Carmen asked as we toured the residential center together. Gary and Sandra had been released from federal prison 6 months earlier after serving their full 18-month sentences. They had moved to a small apartment in Austin where they both worked minimum wage jobs to pay victim restitution and rebuild their lives. "They send Christmas cards," I said. "Nothing dramatic, just acknowledgments that we're all alive and functioning." "Do you think you'll ever have a real relationship with them again?" I considered her question while watching residents prepare dinner together in the kitchen, where my parents had once demanded that I take responsibility for their debts. Maybe someday, but it would have to be a completely different kind of relationship than we had before, based on respect and boundaries, rather than guilt and obligation. That seems fair. For now, I'm focused on the family we're building together and the extended family we're creating through Bridge Forward Foundation. Carmen squeezed my hand as we walked through the backyard, where Douglas had installed a garden that residents could use for therapy and practical life skills development. Speaking of the family we're building," she said with a smile that suggested important news, "I have something to tell you." Her announcement that she was pregnant filled me with joy and terror in equal measure. Joy because we would create the loving, supportive family environment that I had always craved. terror because I would have to learn how to be a parent without positive role models from my own childhood. "You're going to be an amazing father," Carmen said, reading the worry in my expression. "Look at all the young people you've already helped raise through Bridge Forward Foundation. Look at the nurturing environment you've created in this house." That evening, I sat in our Seattle apartment working on my speech for Bridge Forward Foundation's annual fundraising dinner the following week. The event would bring together donors, volunteers, political supporters, and program graduates to celebrate our accomplishments and plan future expansion. But I was also preparing remarks for a more personal milestone. Tracy Morrison had reached out the previous month to ask if I would be willing to speak at a community forum in Dallas about family financial abuse prevention. Her request had surprised me, but her genuine commitment to helping other people avoid the manipulation she had participated in convinced me to accept her invitation. "I don't expect to earn your forgiveness by organizing this event," Tracy had explained during our phone conversation. "I just want to use my experience to help other people recognize the warning signs of family financial abuse before they become victims or participants." The forum would be held at the community center 2 miles from my childhood home. Local families, social workers, law enforcement officers, and financial advisors would gather to discuss how communities could better protect young adults from family exploitation. My return to Dallas would be emotionally challenging, but it represented an important step in transforming personal trauma into community education. The night before my flight to Dallas, I received an unexpected phone call from Gary Thompson. "I heard you're coming back to town for Tracy's community forum." My father said, his voice hesitant and older than I remembered. "That's right. Would you be willing to meet for coffee just to talk? No demands, no manipulation, no agenda. Just a conversation between two adults who share some complicated history." I considered his request carefully. 2 years of therapy, personal growth, and building healthy relationships had taught me that forgiveness did not require rebuilding trust, and that healthy boundaries could coexist with civil communication. "1 hour," I said. "Public place. Carmen comes with me." "Fair enough." We met at a coffee shop near the Dallas airport before my flight home. Gary looked significantly older than his 54 years. Prison had aged him, but more importantly, genuine remorse had changed his demeanor from aggressive entitlement to humble accountability. "I want you to know that we've been following your work with Bridge Forward Foundation," Gary said, sitting across from Carmen and me in a booth near the window. "We're proud of what you've built, even though we have no right to take credit for your success." "Thank you. I also want you to know that we've been attending therapy sessions with other families affected by financial crimes, learning about the psychology of financial abuse, understanding how desperation can lead to destructive choices." Sandra had joined us quietly, looking nervous, but determined to participate in this difficult conversation. "We're not asking for forgiveness," Sandra said carefully. "We're not asking to be part of your life. We just wanted you to know that we understand the damage we caused, and we're committed to making better choices going forward." Carmen studied both of my parents with the analytical attention she brought to evaluating business partnerships. "What does making better choices look like for you now?" she asked. "Stable jobs, honest financial management, paying restitution to our victims," Gary replied. "We also volunteer with a nonprofit organization that provides financial counseling to families in crisis. We tell our story to other parents who might be tempted to exploit their children financially," Sandra added. "We help them understand that short-term financial problems never justify long-term character compromises." I listened to my parents describe their efforts at rehabilitation and community service, and I realized that their genuine accountability was more meaningful than any apology could have been. "I'm glad you're helping other families avoid the mistakes you made," I said sincerely. "That's the most valuable contribution you can make." We talked for nearly 2 hours, far longer than I had planned. Not about rebuilding our family relationship, but about the parallel work we were doing to address family financial abuse from different perspectives. When Carmen and I boarded our flight back to Seattle, I felt a sense of closure that I had not expected. Not reconciliation, but resolution. My parents were taking responsibility for their actions and using their experience to help other people. I was using my experience to help abuse victims rebuild their lives. We were all choosing to create something positive from a destructive situation. 6 months later, Carmen gave birth to our daughter Isabella Rodriguez Thompson. Holding her in the hospital room, surrounded by Carmen's parents, Douglas Maria Santos, and several Bridge Forward Foundation staff members who had become our chosen family, I understood that this child would grow up in an environment of unconditional love and support. Isabella would never experience the financial manipulation, emotional exploitation, or conditional approval that had defined my childhood. She would learn that family relationships should nurture individual growth rather than stifle it. More importantly, she would grow up understanding that building meaningful work, helping other people, and maintaining healthy boundaries were not selfish choices, but essential elements of a life well lived. As I write this story, Bridge Forward Foundation has helped over 500 young adults escape family financial abuse situations. We operate residential programs in 12 states, have influenced federal legislation protecting young adults from financial exploitation, and have trained hundreds of social workers, attorneys, and law enforcement officers to recognize and respond to family financial abuse. Carmen's coffee business has grown into a regional chain that employs over 200 people, many of whom are Bridge Forward Foundation program graduates who needed stable employment opportunities while rebuilding their lives. Douglas has become Isabella's grandfather in every meaningful sense, teaching her about business kindness and the importance of using success to create opportunities for other people. My relationship with my parents has evolved into civil, distant communication. We exchange holiday cards, brief updates on major life events, and respect for each other's boundaries. It is not the warm family relationship I once hoped for, but it is honest, healthy, and free from manipulation. The life lesson that emerged from my journey is both simple and profound. Real family support nurtures your dreams and celebrates your achievements. Anyone who exploits your love, loyalty, or financial resources for their benefit is not acting as family, regardless of biological relationships. Building a life of meaning requires the courage to leave behind relationships that diminish you, and the wisdom to invest in relationships that help you grow. Financial independence is not just about money. It is about the freedom to make choices based on your values, rather than other people's demands. Most importantly, personal pain can become purposeful service when you choose to help other people avoid similar trauma. The greatest revenge against those who try to destroy your future is building a future that helps other people protect theirs. Isabella is now 6 months old, and she smiles when I tell her stories about the amazing life she will build, with love, support, and unlimited possibilities. She will grow up knowing that she is valued for who she is rather than what she can provide to others. That is the most important legacy Carmen and I can give her. Have you ever experienced family relationships that felt more like financial transactions than emotional support? How did you find the courage to establish healthy boundaries with people you loved? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Your experiences might help other people recognize their own worth and build better relationships. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to help other people find resources for dealing with family financial abuse. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about overcoming adversity and building meaningful lives. And please share this video with anyone who might benefit from understanding that they deserve relationships based on love and respect, rather than exploitation and manipulation. Thank you for listening to my story and for supporting the work of organizations that help people build better futures. I hope your journey leads you to relationships that celebrate your success rather than exploit your loyalty. Remember, you are worthy of unconditional love, and anyone who makes their support conditional on your financial contributions is not acting in your best interests. Trust your instincts, seek help when you need it, and never be afraid to choose your own well-being over other people's demands. Your future belongs to you. Build something beautiful with it.